welcome to another episode of Money for Nothing, the podcast about music and capitalism. I'm Saxon with Sam Backer as always, and today we're talking AI again and all of the various moves and news that have been happening around AI and music in 2024. There's been massive amounts of money being tossed to generative AI music apps like Suno and Udio, which are essentially, if I understand correctly, machine learning based production apps around music. At the same time, there's companies facing mounting legal woes as they face lawsuits from RIAA, Recording Industry Association of America, and the big labels claiming as one suit,
clever and clap for RIAA, yay!
Claiming as one suit put it, unimaginable scales of copyright infringement.
I love that's how the suits talk.
Yeah, unimaginable scales. But that's not all. Lawmakers on both the state, federal level, and in the EU are also starting to introduce, discuss, pass, investigate AI and copyright infringement around music and other forms of creative production. And if that isn't enough, this also means that there has been butting heads with the big boys of the tech industry like Google and Amazon, who are like literally pouring billions of dollars into AI companies like Anthropic. Yeah, Anthropic. I guess. But
make your name sound stupid. I'm not required, I think, to say it the cool way you want to. It's Anthropic.
Yeah, not Anthropic. And of course, are the biggest, who are, so basically, obviously these tech companies are the biggest proponents of this AI generative overloading world they're trying to shove down our throats.
And, with like so much speed, like the future's yesterday, baby.
The future is yesterday. And also very recently, these companies are coming up with a slew of explanations and excuses suggesting that they aren't violating any kind of copyright laws, on and on. So we'll be discussing all of this.
In fact,
the most interesting thing to come out of all of this is that thanks to this vast and evolving technology, we here at Money for Nothing, the podcast about music and capitalism, have a new theme song thanks to the AI generative app of Suno. Let's hit it.
Talking about the music, the highs and the lows, from Cali to New York, we set the scene. Capitalism and beats, it's the podcast dream. Riding the rhythm, we keep it real tight. Intellectual chat all through the night. Two hosts, one mic, got the vibes we trust. Talking money and music, it's more than just us. Podcast vibes, we going all in. Music industry, where do we begin? Capital flows.
Red wine.
So Sam, did you what did you put? What text did you put in to generate that new theme song? Don't worry, it's not our new theme song. Theme song by Bird.
So I am upset because I think the people at Suno are cowards. I explicitly asked for a dance hall reggae song about two people recording a podcast about music and capitalism. And I said that I wanted two voices, and I wanted one of them to be from California and the other to be a Jew from New York. And I was like, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. They're going to be cowards and not do our voices right. And they didn't. They had one like indeterminate voiced guy spitting sick rhymes.
In celebration of, did you think of making it in the style of dancehall in celebration of Vibes Cartel being released from?
I just
prison?
figured that would be what our theme song would be. I don't know. That seemed obvious to me. Like,
just like Bad Boys is for some reason the theme to Cops. We would for some reason have a like '90s dancehall tune.
Yeah. No, like a SoCal. 90s
yeah, right. Oh
tune.
Yeah. Okay, bird language. Get on it. So where do you want to start with all this? I mean, we got legislation, we got copyright infringement, we got billions of dollars being poured into AI. We also have some examples of like what the future is. Google dropping some various apps that are in the style of. You could basically create a song in the vocal stylings of like somebody like T-Pain or Charlie XCX, amongst others. Yeah, like where
Part
do
of
we
me
want to
wants
start with
to
this?
just like talk to like really, in a way I don't know if we've quite done before, like really talk about this technology, because I think there's a lot of different ways that AI can be used, and AI can be can like function, but like this whole kerfluffle is about like a very specific set of, frankly, the stupidest AI apps.
As heard recently by our
Right, like I think that like in a fundamental level, like these are the ones with like the most like wow appeal and the most like, but I really don't see how these are musically useful. Like there are ways that like AI could be used by musicians. There's some really
it's like a gimmick right now.
yeah, I know. I mean, I think that there's some really, really cool ways that AI is starting to be used by musicians. Like the ability to pull individual sampled like tracks out of recordings that don't have like individual tracks is insane, right? The idea that you can use machine learning to pull out, like, if you just want like the bass part on Louie Louie, when we know that Louie Louie was recorded by 15 guys around a single microphone. So there's no way, like there aren't individual tracks that you could sample or mess with. And machine learning allows you to like, they analyze the sonic signatures and figure out how to pull out individual tracks like that. That's wild. There's like cool things you could do with that. You know, in my like most like positive moments, I'm like, it's gonna be like sample-delic hip hop like 2. You know what I mean? Like imagine what like young De La Soul could have done with being able to pull any piece of music, any set of like any part out of any piece of recorded music. That's insane. That's a game-changing set of possibilities. And then like potentially like work with machine learning to like manipulate that sound really quickly. But that's not what's getting the big bucks, and that's not what's getting the lawsuits, and that's not what's getting like Mark Andreessen like it's not A7 what's it called?
Oh god, yeah, I don't know. Whatever his fucking
thing, goddamn tech. Give us money, but like little did you know that we're the future of civilization, Saxon and I. We'll take that first funding round is wrapping up, and there's only a few slots left. But no. So I think that there's like cool uses, like, and this is the thing that like is stupid.
Yeah, there's cool uses for sure, 100%, and like it will probably continue to get cooler. But I guess kind of one of the questions around, I mean, maybe this sounds funny, and tell me if I'm wrong, but how cool it gets is going to be determined by essentially laws and legislation, and then also by money, essentially, like whatever these big tech companies and the major labels feel is going to earn them money. It's kind of like the story of the internet, like the potential of the internet versus like what the internet's become, essentially. And I think that's kind of what I feel like that's a good example of like what we have going on here right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean that's always true, right? That's literally never that's right. It's true 100% of the time.
Yeah. And like listen back to our previous episode where we talked a lot about AI. That was a live recording from the Music and Tech from the Wavelengths Music and Tech festival in New York, where we recorded live. And we talk about this very thing, that like we can talk about all the wonderful, endlessly imaginable things that like AI could possibly do, but ultimately it's going to run into a lot of red tape, a lot of money, and like that's probably going to determine its direction.
I mean, but that's like basic, like, to quote the Democratic presumptive nominee, like AI is going to be structured, it's going to be determined by the context of all that exists around it and everything that has come before. Like, yeah, it's going to be determined by money. But I also think what's interesting in this moment, and this is this funny thing, and we've talked about this before, about like that one level, there was a seamless track from Web 3 to AI. It's like people are like, Web3 is going to change the world. Web3 is going to change the world. Web3 is going to change the world. Oh, actually, AI is going to change the world, as if nothing had changed,
Right.
except that AI actually like can do some stuff. So I feel like people talk about AI in music as like this one thing, and like no, it's not. There's many different possibilities here. And again, the all the money and all of the press and all the publicity and like you're saying, Saxon, the big court cases that are going to determine how things are structured going forward are all being determined by the stupidest possible vision of like what AI music is and could be. It's a weird vision. It's like and that's why I think it might be worth just taking a second and like talking through the tech and what it could maybe do and what it could like not do and how it might turn out before we like at a somewhat abstract level before getting into like you're saying that this legislation and these lawsuits. Okay, so both of these companies do text to audio.
That's Suno and
Suno and Udio, which is hard and unpleasant.
Udio, audio.
It's unpleasant to say. It's got a bad mouthfeel, that company name. They both do text to sound. So I like put in a set of words. There's up to 200 words the kind of intro version accepts, and out popped that amazing theme song for our program. And this is weird for a couple of different levels. Like one, like I was saying, is like unclear how anyone who's like a musician could possibly use this. And another, right, like it's so uncontrolled. It's not that good. Like it produces like mid-tier song. It's very impressive that it can make up a song at all, I guess. But like there are so many songs. Friend of the pod, David Turners, is like, there are so many really good songs that I don't want to listen to. Like, why would I want to spend time listening to like a mediocre song? There's already.
I was at a party and a guy was kind of fooling around with this, and he was like making like songs about like him eating like hot dogs and hamburgers and like, you know, the style of like some sort of like post hardcore like emo like band, and it was like a laugh. It was like essentially like we kind of like listened to it, a couple that he made, and we like laughed about it, and then it was like the conversation moved on. And it feels like that's kind of its only use at this point is like, oh, like. But then again, I mean, you know, like who out there, and this is the question I have with all of this, like who out there is like seriously using this technology right now to create like a massive hit or have a vision as like an artist trying to develop a
I don't know if you could develop
and like
a sound that like that's the thing, is it's so alien to how people make music. And there was I actually looked for it. There's an article I read about this, like someone discussing this, and I can't credit it because I couldn't find it again. But they were talking about how like this is a fantasy of solo musical production just by yourself. Like it's an antisocial way of producing music. And they're like, personally, in my experience, the times I've been in bands with my friends, it's like the best way to hang out with people. One of the best ways is to make music. It's actually one of the sad things about America is like people don't get to be in bands all the time. Like making music as a social activity is a great way to be social together. And this is like very isolating.
Yeah, and even solo artists, like there's the component of like actually going out and like, you know, playing the fucking music. Or even if you're a DJ, your point of being a DJ or as a producer is to like play like parties.
I also think that at another level, like at a deep like, and the weird thing about this is why I think it actually, I struggle to imagine how it could be useful. Though maybe it's just like you make 1 million of these and you find a good one. But like, this almost gets Hegelian, bro. Like the idea that like part of the process of making art, part of the process of being a person is like, you have an idea and fantasy about how the world's going to act, and then it resists, right? Like you're trying to play a song on guitar, and like the guitar is a physical thing, and it doesn't exactly do what you want to do perfectly. And like part a essential part of creativity is the engagement and the iterative working through of those frustrations and of the resistance of the medium to your efforts to do it. Actually, I think that if you just had total control, if you didn't have to put in effort and there wasn't any resistance, I don't know if there would be art. And I do feel like how easy it is to make means there's no control exactly, and there's no resistance. But I also, besides it being who's this for, I feel like I was thinking about this, right? I was trying to be why do we even care at all about these companies? And the answer is maybe we shouldn't. But I thought it was worth taking them at their word for a second, which is always maybe a useful exercise, and trying to play out potential futures of this becomes important. Don't ask me how, don't ask me why, but it becomes really widespread. And I feel like there's the two potential futures I want to talk about are the mids and the the mids and the maximalist. And see what you think about this, right? The mids, I think, is the songs get okay. They get a little bit better than this, but they're never all that good. But there's a ton of them. Right? What would happen if that happened, right? So it doesn't ever end up significantly competing with traditional recorded music at the top end, right? No one's going on the radio and hearing an AI song because it's just never as good as what Ed Sheeran, the John Henry of writing AI songs. It's never as good as an Ed Sheeran song, designed in a lab to crush the pop charts. But how would it get used? And it seems like the way it would get used would be it would flood social media, right? It would flood social media. It would probably put a further downward pressure on the price of recorded music. I think that even if it only got kind of mid, a chunk better than this, but never, because of the lack of recorded data, because of, there just isn't enough training data maybe to make it really good. Not enough music exists.
That's a wild concept to think
about.
Oh,
no, it's for all of these fucking machine learning models, a totally real possibility is they were invented too soon in human technology.
Yeah.
And literally there's not these could produce gods, but there's not enough stuff to train them on. And because now in the training sets are other things produced by AI, which actually degrades the quality of AI that's trained.
Degrades the quality of it.
Well, yep. We were protected by when they were invented. Unclear if that's going to happen.
So it just needs to understand musical theory or something. I don't know.
But
yeah, basically there's not enough music. There's not enough music. There's basically not enough recording.
Maybe possibly. And so it gets pretty good, but never gets that good. So one thing that would do, it seems is we talk a lot about how music has moved away from being solely contained on records to being this thing that's part of these multimedia streams. And I think that a big way that musical value is moving forward, that we're a growth area in how music is going to continue to be valued in society, is music in TikTok videos, music in the back of Instagram, music in the broad sync universe, which makes some people some money, but is we're all going to live in some form of the multiverse a little bit some of the time, and it's all going to have a soundtrack. And it's totally possible that in a mids version of this, all of that soundtrack is AI generated because it's just cheaper.
Yeah, so you mean all these different musical touch points, commercials, movies maybe, or television shows, or even YouTube shorts, or whatever.
Or you could imagine there's a $15 or there's a 25. This is with in the future, so everything. Prices are continued to be inflated. There's $25 a month Spotify or there's $10 a month Spotify, but 30% of what you listen to is AI.
Yeah, sure. What and this is the mids vision.
This is the mids vision, right? And so what happens
We're going
there?
by weed ranking here.
What?
This is the swag. This is the mids.
This is the hydro. Yeah, hydro swag vision of the future.
Okay.
And so like at that point, some of the moves that are already being made actually feel like the music biz moves that are already being made are like aimed at this mid vision. That would break the way that streaming currently pays out. Just shatter it. And it seems like the major labels are already moving by restructuring what kind of songs get paid out, restructuring, like talking about making some streams like valued streams, which is actually hilarious because it's literally, I don't know if I said this before, it's like literally how ASCAP functioned when they first started. They're like, there are two kinds or three classes of composers, and really good composers should just get more money. It's like, who's the really good composer? Everyone on the ASCAP board. It redoes streaming.
Exactly, right.
It's all integrated through various social media things, and kind of like that's more of the same, right? Superstars make more money. It's harder for lower artists to break in. Certainly for like that. By diluting the overall pool of music, it means there's a lot of little pieces of pay that don't happen for working musicians. And it's honestly, it's just a bummer. It's like just like the world, but worse.
It seems the most likely outcome. because the sticky icky level, the highest level, like this is like awesome. Even then, and I mean, there's still the component like, are our like radio hits being made by like AI, like that level? Like, do they like trying to imagine that level?
So it's wild, and I think it's worth imagining because I think that like we're gonna do like the money for nothing thing, because I think that one of the things that these tech bros do, and we're gonna talk. There's some, dear listener, there's some really good tech bros in this episode. Holy shit. We got some of that straight 2014 like high on oxygen looking out over the San Francisco skyline grade bullshit that some of these companies are peddling. It's honestly like kind of refreshing in that like I'm like, I thought you guys gave up on this. Like it's nice to see that you're still at it.
Yeah, right.
But I think it's worth, the reason I brought that up is because I think that like they are pushing the super utopian vision, like the sticky icky vision of this. And it's worth talking about like how that would function if not only the technology worked out, but also there's do you remember that show House of Cards? So
Yeah.
there's like one of the meanest things I've ever seen written about a show where they're like, House of Cards is what Washington would be like if there were only two smart people in it. Like if no one else was smart, but like it turns out that, I mean, either everyone's smart or like it's Veep,
no
and it's Veep. But I feel like this is this vision of like, there's let's first talk about the sticky icky vision if they're the only smart ones, and then we're gonna talk about it if like, as would actually be true, like there were other people in the world, and like imagine this, like everyone can generate the best song you've ever heard, right? What happens?
I mean, the music industry basically, like as we know it, completely.
Yeah,
crumbles.
I mean, there's that, but I kind of think weirdly like things change less than you'd think they would, because it turns out like, again, and this is the fundamentally antisocial nature of this, is like, yes, I know sometimes I like to like sit in my bedroom and like listen to Captain Jazz and be like, I'm the only one who understands this. But
Oh, deep cut.
no, that's actually not true. I look, Captain Jazz is a pretty good band. Don't get me wrong. Anyway, but like people listen to music to like engage with other people listening to music, and like there's a social component of music that's super important. Maybe like the reason it exists. Like
Yeah. I was about to say, because I've been driving around listening to a lot of like radio for the first time in a long time. Love Los Angeles radio stations. I mean, just awesome. And you do realize that it's like there's such a social component to it. Not the least like that I hear not just one but all three of the Kendrick diss tracks at least every 4 minutes on like 5 different stations in Los Angeles. but even that it has like a social component.
Honestly, one of my favorite. This is total sidebar, but one of my favorite like trippy audio experiences is you're listening to a radio station. And then a car pulls up next to you, listening to the same station, and you can you hear their music. You hear that phase in and then lock in is a really. I just love that. I've always loved that.
Shared listening.
Right. So the question would be okay, so if you need that social component, if you need that shared listening, but the production of music is no longer the limiting factor because you have basically an infinite number of Ed Sheerans trapped in your basement. So I feel like you still have,
or Claude Debussy's,
or some horrifying combination of the two.
Ooh. Okay, that's next on the Udio
Let's
text
go.
to
Pop
text
that
music.
into the machine, baby.
Let's go.
So
we can do this all night while smoking weed and getting drunk. It's actually just the new party game. Okay, anyways, continue.
Look, if it was good, it'd be kind of fun. But I think that what happens then is what's valuable in the music industry is mimetic positioning, right? The ability to not just produce a good song, but put it in with the right way, with the dance routine. Honestly, this vastly increases I assume in this world there's also AI dancers, but dance routines go up in value, dance crazes, because that's something that's definitely shared, that you have to do the same song together. So honestly, in the sticky icky version of text to audio production, I forecast here a vast increase in the number of songs that have dances to go with them, because that's a shared thing and requires the same song. That said, I think more generally what you get is it kind of becomes about platforms, I guess, then, right? I'm thinking a lot about Mr. Beast, right? The biggest YouTube guy. If you don't know him, you're probably better off. But
I only recently learned of him, but because I'm getting into an age where I'm just letting the world pass me by, and I just pretend like I don't understand anything.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Which is really bodes well for this podcast.
Yeah.
No, but No, but yeah.
No, just this idea
continue.
that he produces these videos and they rack up huge numbers of hits, but it's sort of an ongoing thing. I don't know if people go back to particular legendary Mr. Beast ones from the past. It's there always has to be a new thing. Yes, you can go back through the whole back catalog, but it's it's always about the next thing, and they're always kind of the same, but they're all kind of different. And that's in some ways the half-life of that recorded music goes down to almost zero, and it's just about people with platforms making new things. It's almost like music streaming, but like Twitch streaming, right? It's
but I'm I do think about this though. I do think there still needs to be people who are, and so in this maximalist it's perfect, it can create the best composition song ever. In that vision though, I do think though that there still is the listener versus the creator. Because somebody's got to actually still do that, and majority of people don't make music or even care about making music and just want to be passive
or want to be in a
so
community of listeners instead of a community of performers.
Right, exactly. And so I think that in some ways it does work, but it just for a large portion of of people, don't care and probably just participate in whatever these text to music creators, I guess we would call it.
But I think it's going to be a lot more about personality, a lot more about positioning, a lot more about like doing stuff live. Honestly, their lives are gonna suck because they're gonna have to be on camera 18 hours a day, like performing to, or it's all AI.
But here's like another interesting thing. Like, you know, maybe this is a bad example, but the new JPEG Mafia dropped yesterday, and we were listening to it late last night, and that's some wild artistry there. Okay, let's just leave it at that, whether you like it or not. And the thing is, it does feel to me, dare I use this word, dare like music critics who happen to listen to us like get on me for this, but it does feel like it's progressive in a sense that it's pushing the possibility of what hip hop and music and like metal.
When you
and,
say
like,
it's
can,
scaring
like,
the hose,
and like this is something to relate this back to like what we're talking about is like the interesting thing about it though is like at what point does the music like move forward and like develop? If all this stuff is like being, if what you know, so because you were saying earlier that like if AI is pulling from AI created tunes, it actually like deteriorates like the quality of what's being produced, right? So if that's the case and everything is being produced by this like text to music or whatever it is, you know, like making all the new music, then how is music like actually like developing and moving forward?
like it's stopped. It's the end of history.
In a way, it is
it's
like
done. It's done. Music is done. We have an infinite supply of the same things.
Right. And
So we break the machines and go back out into the fields.
and this is one thing about this episode that I did have some reservations about, that like maybe there's people out there who have thought about this and who have answers about how that works technologically, but it does bring up that question where it's like, you know, I was just thinking about who is the artist, right? If the artist is the one then creating it, but then if an artist creates because they have like a vision, right? And like let's say somebody like JPEG Mafia has this wild, dark, insane genre mixing vision, like you would do that for a while, I guess, with like this AI technology, but at some point it would, like you said, kind of like reach an end point where there would be no more progression. It feels like it would just kind of because you have nobody, because you're just pulling from all the same data sets, I guess.
I think that's right, and I think that the reason that the circularity of that endpoint and its unreality, like the sterility of that vision of the future.
Big words there.
The reason it's so sterile, I think, is kind of this is because it could never happen. And the reason it could never happen is because this Silicon Valley fantasy fundamentally it assumes that they're the only smart people and that they're going to just like roll right over the music industry, roll right over the creative economy. And that there's going to be like, no, like it's just, there's no history, right? There is no context of everything that came before it. And so I feel like the reason that the sterility wouldn't happen, and the reason maybe even in a vision where like music to text generation gets really, really good, is you would have new sounds. And then as sure as it like, I'd bet any amount of money, there would be a way, the music industry would find a way to copyright them and limit them so that these new pockets of kind of specialness, extra attention, extra sounds, new sounds weren't just immediately accessible. They'd find a way to limit.
You would have to pay like some sort of like tiered to get like new created AI generated fake instruments that it's
or like the flip, like you need to pay in order to get access to the latest stream of a specific like I think that there would be ways, that legal ways, likely probably based around publicity laws, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later, like that a lot of these I think that there would be ways that these companies would be able to continue to kind of keep their cordoned off areas, that it just wouldn't just be like a total free-for-all of every recorded sound ever.
Right. So which is basically why like I think like another reason why this maximalist vision probably won't ever actually like come to fruition. But I think that also you mentioned something. I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is like the Silicon Valley fantasy. They're trying to sell something.
Yeah.
And so,
yes.
and so like So that Silicon Valley fantasy is essentially just to like get funding and make money and like eventually get sold off to Google because your technology is the best or something. I don't know if they actually have or believe in that vision.
I think that's the weird thing about this, like this form of capitalism, which they're trying. Again, unbelievable. Like, it is late in the day to be pulling this shit. In that they're trying, this is not a business model that makes sense. Is like what they're going to sell tokens to individual people. Like, people are going to buy enough music making tokens for them to justify $150 million of investment like this. Like, no, that's never going to happen. Like, exactly what you're saying. The reason that they have to paint an entire future and predicate their model on the fantasy of a future in which the entirety of history has been declared illegal and abolished, and all you have is the unmitigated, like, never-ending recombinatory play of AIs on AIs, is because, like you're saying, they have to say, like, this technology is going to change the world. Not in like a nuts and bolts day by day way, but in like a platonic categorical way. And then that's why you should pay $250 to $1 million to acquire us, Mr. Alphabet. Like, there's no way. There's no way. Like you're saying, people want to buy music. They don't want to. There's no way you're going to make $150 million selling people the ability to make music at this generalized level. Like, if you're Yamaha and you're being like, this is an incredibly detailed plugin that allows you to, right? Maybe. But even then, I don't know. That's such a good question. I don't know off the top of my head how much money, like, music making in a non, like, this is your first, you turned 13 and you're in America and you're a boy, you get a Stratocaster. Like, like, Squire Strat. Not a Fender Strat, a Squire Strat. Like, besides, like, I don't like how much the upper end music making economy actually makes, but I doubt it makes like this level of investment. And similarly, some of the new startups that are trying to like use AI in more music specific ways are getting like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, not like 150 million.
Why the Udios and the Sunos of the world are pushing back, because essentially they're trying to make this technology be the best as possible so they can sell it probably or be acquired or get more investment
or bring about the end of time. Like, that's like, no, literally there's like a end of time vision with some of these arguments. That's wild.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go into the end of time vision, or would you like to go into what some of the things that some of the suing and the legislation?
Oh no, let's go from the Empyrean back down to the mud, baby. Let's go to the lawsuits.
Let's go to the lawsuits. Where do I even start here? This is like quite extensive. Basically, the big labels are suing everyone.
Click, end of episode.
and basically, these, the companies that they're suing, or the companies that are investing into these companies, or these companies that are like have a similar vision and desire to expand AI, like Unhinged, Google, Amazon, Meta, are coming up with all kinds of excuses suggesting that they aren't violating any kind of copyright law, including some public statements suggesting that anything online is fair use. And there's like other angles as well, including more of a sort of pro-free market would hurt development angle. But if there's like one thing that all of these players, these major tech players involved agree on, is that they don't want to or think they should have to pay any kind of money to train their AI models on copyrighted work. And that's basically what UMG, the big boys, are suing are suing these companies essentially.
So basically, I think there's been an interesting creep here, which is that initially the big labels are like, so the only way that you can train these models is by just giving them like enormous numbers of examples
as we've been suggesting,
that they kind of run through and analyze over and over and over and over again, and basically like learn. So the way these models tend to work, this is generally large language models, which the text to music ones are. Music AI probably functions a little bit differently, but basically they're made up of huge numbers, like billion, of these tiny little selectors that kind of like move, like 13 billion of these tiny little switches, basically. And you run through them all, and they're all given slightly different rates. And you run through them all, and it gets over and over and over and over, and they get more and more and more and more precise for a task, right? So basically, when you train a model like this, again, this is very general. I'm sure I'm getting it wrong. Certain things is like you'd say, make me a country song. And then you'd have a country song that you wanted and a set of examples of country songs. And you'd be like, make me a country song. And it would be off. And you'd be like, no, a country song's like that. You make me a country song. And the country song's slightly less off. And you do that an incredible number of times with an incredible number of different songs and different tasks. And that's how you train one of these things. That's not exactly right, but it's a general ballpark.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically.
And so in doing these things, the training data is absolutely integral. And often they make lots and lots of copies of them as part of doing the training. Right, which is already like arguably a copyright infringement, though no one got mad when Spotify did it all the time. But in addition, it means that, and I think my understanding of this is an open area of research generally. And there's some really cool tricks that they are working on that like researchers have discovered to see if basically the question is, these models are big enough and have enough memory power. It's possible that they've just memorized stuff, right? That it's not just recombined, it's in there at some level. And so there's some really cool studies out for not for music, but for text, which is like if you give it a sentence and kind of blank out the name of a character from a book and ask it to complete the sentence. A character's name is usually relatively arbitrary, right? So if the AI models just like guess the random characters' names all the time correctly, it's because they just have the sentence memorized. It's like it's in there somewhere.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. And is this also an excuse for like some of the tech companies? One of them, I think it was Google or something, was saying that it's like similar. Getting this data is similar to reading a book.
So they
actually use that excuse in response to the federal
government. So there's a lot of debates about like at some level. So you have to train on all this data. All this data, which, by the way, like you definitely aren't allowed. And here's the thing. They say it's all from little snippets that are available on the internet. And like, there's no way that's true. They like 100%, like there isn't enough like freely, unless you just use YouTube. But even that is like a copyright violation. There's no way they didn't like have a huge like 50, 100,000 terabyte library of like music somewhere. And it's very hard to track. But all this is to say is that initially the companies started releasing this stuff. The record labels were like, bro, don't you need to be training on all of our like copyrighted material? And the tech companies were like, we don't want to talk about how our training functioned. And then the lawsuits are getting closer, and it's really interesting that both of them make this like almost heel turn and are like, okay, the excuse that like we're going to just stonewall you and not tell you where the training data, which is what OpenAI does, what a lot of these companies do. Or just be like, oh yeah, we used a bunch of different stuff. We're not quite sure. We didn't keep great notes or whatever. They're like, no. Actually, yes, we definitely did. and it's all fair use. Which is a complicated question. And it's going to be like, because at some level, and we've talked about this with like music copyright fights in the past, right? There's only so many chord progressions. There's only so many ways you can think about a song. And a lot of when people do these things, like, yeah, you sit there and you listen to 1,000 blues songs over and over and over again, and then you write your own one, and there's little bits of a bunch of different songs. Like, That's like how human creativity works. You could argue.
Also, like I'd also add that like the fair use law is like very vague. It basically, says that you can like use this work to comment upon, criticize, parody, or a copyrighted work, but it also says it for quote unquote transformative purposes, which is so vague, and like as an argument could be made over that this is transformative, and that's what we're using it, which is another argument they're making.
I think Saxon, did you listen to the brilliant Sonos song "Little Country Boy"?
Yes.
So let's just play it very briefly for the good people. This transformative work, "Little Country Boy."
Yeah, down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the evergreens, there's not an old cabin made of earth and wood, where lived a country boy named Johnny B. Good, who never ever learned to read or write so well, but he could play a guitar.
Oh my God, I have not ever heard that song before.
I have never heard that song before.
No, yeah, so that's clearly Johnny B. Good, down to the words Johnny B. Good. It suggests that boy is that Chuck Berry song bouncing around in there somewhere. And the existence of songs like these has started to, I think, put real pressure on these companies. And it points to the ways in which like this is that some of the laws and ways we have for thinking about how creativity and how copyright work were clearly not designed for this specific set of technologies. And there is this part of me where I'm like, this is the enclosure. This is the enclosure. It's happening right now, right? Because unlike the example of a kid who's learning guitar by watching blues things on the internet, right? Every kid who does that needs to learn again and buys a ton of records, and that supports musicians and then makes their own thing. This happens once. You have to learn this one, maybe with a different model, you have to retrain it, but like, this is the thing, and then it can produce an infinite number of copies of this material. And it just seems crazy. And it seems crazy to me that the move that these tech companies are making is... I'm frankly flabbergasted. Rarely have I seen a set of companies misread a room more badly. Like, okay, so let me read you. This is from the Sonos court deposition, not deposition, like their rebuttal, like to their explanation to the court. They say that not only did they definitely steal all this music, and that it's transformative, and that they're doing this for the good of the people, Saxon. They're doing this so that people who once were children with dreams, this is literally in their blog post. They're like, when you were a child, you had dreams and you played music, and then you became an adult and you stopped playing music. Sonos, by typing in text into the Sonos app, you can recapture the beauty of music, like in your life. And they say that the plaintiffs in this lawsuit are seeking to shut us down. They're a collection of the largest record labels in the world. They dominate the music industry. I mean, true. They frame their concern as one about copies of the recordings made in the process of developing the technology. That is, copies never heard or seen by anyone, made solely to analyze the stylistic patterns of pre-existing musical expression. But what the major record labels really don't want is competition. Where Sonos sees musicians, teachers, and everyday people using a new tool to create original music, the labels see a threat to their market share. Just like $150 million of like venture capital funding. And you're like, I am Che Guevara. I am here. I am here to bring freedom to you peasants. Though you look like you were a little convinced by that, Saxon.
I mean, I do think they think it's a threat to their market share, but that's why they're super involved with it, which kind of collapses the argument that they're making in the sense that like, I don't think that Lucian Grange and company are like that. I mean, they're very clear-eyed about the situation, and that's why they're like have their hands in the pie of all of this stuff, and like they just want to make sure that they're going to get paid for it. And I think
that
I think just really before we move on from here, like I do think that yeah, it does sound like that they'll probably lose, not UMG, but these tech companies will probably like lose this copyright lawsuit.
I think that's likely.
Yeah, I think that's pretty likely. Particularly even if you consider like some of the stuff we've talked about in our copyright episodes, like about like Pharrell and like and Robin Thicke and all that stuff. But it is interesting though that like there is this weird thing going on where at the same time that this is going on, there are actual like federal and like local, state level, and also in the EU legislation going on to kind of like corral all this as well. But at the same time, you also do have those big labels who are suing these companies. Actually, it's interesting, right? Because it's like they're suing them, but they're basically just like, we want to be. But don't you feel like it's also actually just them, the big label, saying, no, we need to be involved. Like, you could do this technology. We're all for that, but we need to be involved. You can't do it without us. And that's kind of actually part of the gripe of this tech companies is that it's a lot of like act first, deal with the problems later kind of situation. And this time it's like
I
not
think
so
that that's
that.
right. I mean, I think that like there's some like, I think you're 100% right about the way that the major labels are dealing with this. I think that the rash of legislation, anytime music business legislation is coming out of Tennessee, like sponsored by legislators from Tennessee, it's like, yes, that is the music. That is the music industry making moves. It's a powerful plugged-in industry. I also think like it's powerful and plugged in both because it's rich, but also because people love musicians. Like when your favorite musical artist calls you and is like, as a legislator, and is like, I would like, when Stevie Wonder calls you and is like, I think that this bill's a bad deal. You take the call from Stevie, clearly. So like, I mean,
right.
And so like I think that all of that is the music industry. And I think you're exactly right. They don't want to just get rid of this technology, but they don't want another sector coming in, pushing, messing up streaming, messing up social media. And I think they're pissed because they see this as theft, right? They see this as tech guys coming in, breaking stuff. There's actually an incredibly damning statement from in a Rolling Stone article where they interviewed a bunch of the people, some of the investors, and he was basically like, yeah, I think that if they hadn't if they had deals with the labels, I probably wouldn't have invested in this company, because like the reason it's a cheap investment and the reason like it's not going to be like a Spotify situation where they're just like leaking money to the major labels is because they tried to steal all of their stuff. And my gut is, if I'm the major labels, what you do here is you kill these guys. Like, you smash their businesses and like they never, like, they're done. And then you go, we'd love to work with anyone who wants to work with us, but this doesn't fly.
Yeah, and that's like historically like what they've been doing like since the early 2000s. That's essentially like how they've been operating.
Yeah.
Like, you need to work with us. Yeah, you need to work with us. You know, like with all the streaming. And
but
stuff
I guess
like that,
what's
like,
interesting about this moment, right, is that we haven't seen them. They've been, you need to work with us, but most of the time for the last 15 years, they've been working on this kind of co-option model, right? You need to work with us. We'll cut you in. We'll give you a deal. Right. Things like TikTok, even, they've gotten down to like to real like bare knuckle fighting with TikTok sometimes. UMG certainly did, but like initially cut them a really good deal just to like keep it all in the family. But I think that the extent to which this was just like done without a question, but I think even more is that I think that these companies are the kind of like shock troops, like of a far broader, different part of the tech industry, or maybe the tech industry operating in a different guise. It feels like they don't just see these as like upstart companies, but they see them as like real interlopers from a different segment of capital. That they're like, you're just not disrupting. We're not getting disrupted, bro. It's like, absolutely not.
Right.
But which also is interesting because I do think, and if you look at I think the Library of Congress took public comments about copyright because these lawsuits are starting to really come out, and it's interesting that it does feel like these big companies. I think there's going to be a lot of attention on this lawsuit and these lawsuits and how they're dealt with, because I think that the argument that they are making, and they even kind of say the quiet part out loud in some of these filings, right? Sonos says, we train our models and medium and high quality music that we can find on the open internet. Just like Google's Gemini, Microsoft's Copilot, Anthropic's Claude, OpenAI's ChatGPT, and even Apple's new Apple Intelligence train their models on the open internet. So they are kind of saying, like, guys, if we go down for this, like, Sonos has a one... Suno? That's Sonos. Yeah. Suno, not Sonos. Suno has a valued at $200-something million. OpenAI is a multi-billion-dollar company. It's an order of magnitude bigger, you know? And so I do feel like them being like, guys, you do this too, kind of indicates to me the extent to which this is a test case for a lot of these culture fights that are going to be coming down the pipe.
Which is so interesting because it really kind of goes beyond
Yeah.
music. Because I like, once again, I mean, obviously hit us up if you have a more nuanced or interesting point here, but to expand on what I'm about to say, but it does seem like this is about music, but it's actually about like whatever the decisions made on these copyright laws will impact generative AI across the board, involving like any kind of like creative copyrighted material. And yes, it still would be able to, like, you know, use your facial expressions or whatever, because the debate about whether or not like my likeness is is copyrighted or not is a little bit more complicated. But nonetheless, like, it will impact all of these creative copyrighted material, all this copyrighted material. And so it is interesting how like this music, it's not really just about music. It's actually about something much broader.
And I think what's interesting is, like, why is it about music? Like, no, why does this happen in music? Like we said, when these companies first started happening, like 3+ years ago, before OpenAI even, we were like, it's going to happen with music. And I think it's really interesting. And I think it's something about music's position within a system, within a capitalist system, that we've talked before about the kind of disjunction between the value of musical experience and the amount of, like, how much listening to a meaningful song, like, is how much listening to Many Rivers to Cross when you're sad means to you compared to, like, how much it costs to download Many Rivers to Cross from the iTunes and music store, which is $1.19 or whatever. But actually, this makes me wonder, this fight makes me wonder if there's something else, another element too, which is the weirdness of music's copyright structures. Like, also make it a vessel for these kind of fights. The idea that, like, you can have something that's kind of like Johnny Be Good, and then it's okay. And it's not exactly clear what makes Johnny Be Good. But if you have a Johnny Be Good, you can sell 1 million copies of it. And something that's just like Johnny Be Good doesn't sell any copies. Like, that worthless song is worthless. And that there's something about, like, the amount of force, maybe, it takes to fix music into a commodity form. Like, it takes a lot of legal infrastructure, social custom, cultural practice, all of which are tied to, like, very specific technological dynamics. And every time there's a new technology, all that stuff breaks, and it's like, oh shoot, like, maybe music's not a commodity again. And then they have to do this laborious work of, like, forcing it back into something that you can cleanly and effectively and reproducibly make money from.
Right. And so, like, comparatively, say, like, to, like, the publishing industry, it's like the novel is a commodity object, and even if it's not a physical object, it's on your Kindle, and like this is what we sell. Like this is like, it's like very like definitive, like words on either a page or a screen.
And there's like no one goes to like T.S. Eliot touring the wasteland aside, like no one like goes, no one spent $400 to go to like the My Struggle concert. You know, right. You don't hear someone like humming Nausgard and you're like, oh yeah, now Nausgard's stuck in my head.
No, right. But I mean, even like that aside, I mean, it's like there's been kind of what you're saying, this like constant sort of evolving process over the last like 100+ years of like making music into a commodity, which thus has to change with the technologies.
Yeah.
Like always, like, right. And we talked about even this, like, you know, this idea we've mentioned here before on the podcast of just like how actually like young the idea of like the capital A album is in itself, and how there is like an economic aspect of like, this is something that is this long and like it's right. An artistic process which I can give to you and you will buy it, and then I'll sell it back to you three or four times, and then you'll stream it, and then yeah, I see. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting point, and so that's why it's always like music kind of becomes like this, I don't know what they call it, like bellwether.
Yeah.
Test case. Yeah, for sure.
I'm just wondering, because it seems like it's always music. Like, it's the first industry that's disrupted by the internet. It's the, you know, over and over and over again. And it plays this funny role in capitalism. That's, you know, that's just somewhat different.
We have this podcast.
It's the reason why we have this podcast.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, and it's also something interesting. Like, I was trying to think of like in relation to like gaming. Maybe because of that, because like I guess also because gaming wouldn't be so openly available on the internet. Is that
maybe like it's like you could say like the means of production for musical practice are really accessible and widely distributed.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. And even in forms of like musical theory or whatever, you know, like how many books are out there on like how to like fully develop like a like detailed video game that's like readily available for like PS5 or something, right? Yeah, it's interesting.
And there's no choke point. And there used to be more of a choke point. We've talked about the times when music is more or less controllable.
And then the reason also why like maybe it doesn't work so much for just going through these various mediums, like maybe it doesn't, this sort of fight isn't happening so much between the tech companies and Hollywood, is because Hollywood sees it as a way to like pay less money to writers and actors.
Yeah, well, I think it's clear that
like actually is advantageous to Hollywood, opposed to where like this isn't advantageous to the music industry.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. I think that there's another that the music industry is another part of it, right? Like I think that like if you an industry that's gonna have been rocked by AI already, and I'm sure it's gonna be more, is the like influencer industry, right? Like the amount of AI bullshit that is on, when I guiltily look up like not TikTok even, it's off my phone, I can't handle it. I'm not adult enough to handle having to, I like look up, it's 3 hours later, like I've burnt dinner, it's like it's terrible. I can't handle TikTok on my phone, but like I have to have the YouTube on my app to unlock things, and they've got a TikTok thing. So when I guiltily look at my shitty ersatz TikTok, like there's so much AI bilge on there now.
Yeah,
that's just like it's a video of already seen, but the same video with an AI voice on top. So like that's gonna be totally changed by even simpler generative AI technologies, except that there are platforms, and the platforms are kind of fine with it, but there's not like a united influencers. Like there's some influencers who are on talent agencies, but there's not an influencer industry in the same way. And I kind of feel like
and the closest we have to like protesting that would be like the
actors unions. But then again, you've got Hollywood where it's like it's not as distributed. You've got these big, fairly vertically integrated systems, and they're worried about AI for sure, but they're not quite.
There's also ways to save money, and it's advantageous. I mean, there's this anecdote I think I've like mentioned on this podcast about how apparently like Tyler Perry supposedly scrapped like an $800 million project to build a new studio after seeing one of these these better AI generative video apps technology,
video apps,
losing the language here. But it's interesting. Well, I mean, I just want to go through all those because I think it is also helpful sometimes to compare like other creative industries.
But back to the music industry, I think what's interesting here is like if Hollywood is like fully like Amazon Studio, like Amazon owns MGM, right? Like the Hollywood studios are huge and integrated. What I think is kind of interesting about the music industry, and one of the reasons, another reason why maybe it's playing a test case in this specific set of circumstances, is that it's not integrated the same way. Sony is, right? Warner's to a certain extent, but UMG is the leader and is kind of just a music company. And like, I mean, no, it's part of a broader thing, but these are real companies, and the industry's had its lunch money stolen by other industries before, and it's not so big that it can, if it merges with other industries, it doesn't stay top dog, but it's not so small, I'm sorry, parts of the publishing industry that like, not like academic publishing, which is enormous and a total racket. But like, it's not as small enough to be able to get like pushed around. It's this funny middleweight industry with a history of being litigious.
Well, yeah, so I guess we'll leave it. We'll tie a bow on this episode, and we'll go ahead and continue to watch these lawsuits. I think that's something that will be really interesting to see where this all goes. And also, we'll be reading the occasional public statements by apps like Udio and Sono with their completely dystopic vision of...
No, dude, they're fighting for the people.
Right,
man.
exactly. And just to see how high on the supply these tech bros are, or pretend to be, so they can go ahead and like cash out their millions of dollars of investment that they're getting from somebody, Mark Andreessen. I don't know. Any final statements?
God have mercy on our souls.
Okay, there we go. Music by Bird Language. We'll catch you. Oh, please subscribe to our newsletter, moneyfornothing.substack.com. That's the number 4. And yeah, we'll catch you in a few weeks' time. Until then, we encourage you to create your own AI-generated song. And send it into
the
us, and
best
we'll play it.
AI-generated song about this podcast that we receive will get played on the next episode of the podcast.
Yeah, why not? I'm in. I'm for it. Sorry, Bird Language. You're out. Okay, bye.